They didn't ask me. They told me. Josh leaned forward at the head of the dining table. My table, with that half-smile he gets when he's rehearsed something. Dad, we've decided it's time for you to step back from the company. That was it. No warning. No question. Just a soft little execution over coffee. I blinked. Step back from what? Emily wouldn't meet my eyes. Kara was already scrolling on her phone. Josh, meanwhile, had a manila folder beside him like he was ready to walk me through bullet points. You've done more than enough for us, he said, voice calm, almost soothing. But the business is at a point where we need to evolve. Modernize. You've earned your rest, Dad. Let us take it from here. That was the moment everything shifted. The moment I realized they didn't just want me to retire, they wanted me out. I opened my mouth to argue, but I saw it instantly. The prepared expressions, the tight timing, even the placement of the chairs. This wasn't spontaneous. This was a boardroom ambush dressed up as a family chat. Kara finally spoke without looking up. We've already filed the internal transfer forms. You'll still be listed as founder emeritus. No legal ownership changes, for now. I caught that for now, sharp as a nail under the tongue. Are you firing me from my own company? No one's firing anyone, Josh said, as if I'd embarrassed him by phrasing it that way. We're restructuring. You'll still draw a stipend. And full health benefits. A stipend. Like I was some washed-up mascot they were keeping around for nostalgia. They must have figured I'd just accept it. Maybe they thought I'd be flattered. But what hit me hardest wasn't the betrayal. It was how casual they were about it. Like this had been decided weeks ago. Maybe longer. That company wasn't just a job. It was 30 years of my life. I started it in our garage with an old Xerox machine and a loan from Linda's dad. Built every client relationship myself. Grew it from local flyers and business cards into a solid mid-sized operation with regional accounts. And after Linda passed, it became the only thing that got me out of bed. I thought I was building it for them. But apparently, they thought they were rescuing it from me. Josh handed me the folder. I didn't open it. I just stood up, went to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water so they wouldn't see my hands shaking. I'll think about it, I said. But we all knew it was already done. The next morning, my company login stopped working. No access to the internal dashboard. No server permissions. No system alerts. I texted Harold, my accountant since the 90s, and asked if it was a glitch. He didn't respond. Not that day. Not the next. Instead, a company-wide memo went out 2 days later. Exciting leadership updates, it said. Josh was named president. Kara took over strategy and development. Emily, the only one who looked guilty, was quietly listed as head of people and culture. My name wasn't mentioned. That night, I drove to the office. The keycard still worked, barely. But when I walked through the lobby, everything had changed. New branding on the walls. A modern logo where our old motto used to hang. Built by community, backed by family. I stopped in front of the glass conference room. Josh was inside with a group of junior staff, pointing at a screen and laughing. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did. But he didn't look up. I wish I could say I stormed in and made a scene. That I slammed my hand on the table and demanded answers. But I didn't. I just stood there. I think part of me didn't want to believe it yet. The rest of me was trying not to crumble right there on the tile floor. I went home, ate cold leftovers, sat in the dark with the TV on mute. And around midnight, I logged into the county business registry. Took me a minute to navigate the site. But eventually I found it, the updated filing. 3 new signatures. Mine wasn't one of them. I stared at the screen for a long time. They thought I wouldn't check. They thought I wouldn't understand. But I did. And that was their first mistake. The gala invite came 6 months later. An oversized envelope, thick gold foil, addressed to Richard Hale, founder emeritus. It was the 35th anniversary celebration, black tie, downtown hotel, valet parking, the whole show. I almost didn't go, but something told me I needed to. The ballroom looked like something out of a magazine. Chandeliers, branded cocktail napkins, a slideshow looping pictures from the past 3 decades. There were plenty of photos of Linda and me, back in the early years, shoulder pads and perm curls, but the captions didn't mention names. Just vague phrases like early milestones and first generation. I wasn't seated with my kids. They'd stuck me at a back table with a few retirees and plus ones who didn't recognize me. One woman leaned over and asked if I was with catering. That stung more than I expected. Halfway through dinner, Josh took the stage. He wore a sleek navy suit and a wireless headset mic. You could tell he'd practiced this. The pauses, the laughter, the polished delivery. Tonight we celebrate not just where we've been, he said, but where we're going. The future is about innovation, adaptability, and fresh leadership. No mention of his father. No thanks. No nod to the man who built the bones of what he was standing on. They'd rewritten the story and erased the author. I didn't even finish dessert. I slipped out the side entrance, past the valet, and walked 4 blocks before I realized I hadn't grabbed my coat. I didn't go back. That night, I pulled out the fireproof lockbox from the back of my closet. Inside were the old documents, the originals, articles of incorporation, tax records, lease contracts. One particular file, yellowed at the edges, stopped me cold. I read it once, then again, and then I smiled. Not out of malice, not even satisfaction, just quiet understanding. They thought I was out. They thought they could bury me in a footnote and move on. They'd forgotten who taught them everything they knew. And more importantly, what I never taught them. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. But I knew the moment would come. And when it did, I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't need to. After they boxed me out, I didn't make a fuss. I didn't show up with lawyers or try to storm the gates. I didn't even call to ask why. Let them think I was sulking. Let them think I was heartbroken. The truth was, once I saw how willing they were to push me aside, it wasn't hard to stay gone. That part surprised me. I thought it would hurt longer. But it didn't. There was something clean about the way it ended. No fake apologies. No warm, confused hugs. Just a quiet burial. They put me in the ground with a smile and moved on. So I let them. I stopped going to the office. Stopped checking my old company email. The keycard still worked for a while, but I didn't bother testing it. I didn't want to walk through those doors and see my face taken down from the company wall, the mission statement rewritten without a trace of my handwriting. I didn't need to witness it. I already knew it was gone. So I built new routines. I started my mornings early, same as always, but with no reason to rush. I made my coffee, walked the dog, sat in the backyard with a notepad and wrote down what came to mind. Sometimes it was memories. Sometimes it was numbers, contracts, names. I wasn't sure why I kept track of it at first, but it felt right. I told myself it was just habit, just a way to stay mentally sharp. But part of me knew better. When you spend decades building something, you don't just stop thinking about how it works. You don't forget where the load-bearing beams are. I still got calls, now and then. Clients who didn't realize I'd retired. Vendors asking for clarification on terms I'd written into deals years ago. Most of the calls were quick, little requests, forgotten clauses, but enough of them started coming through that I began to notice a pattern. Josh wasn't returning emails. Kara had started delegating everything downward, and the people under her didn't know what they were doing. A few clients hinted at delays, confused invoices, broken service-level agreements. Nothing catastrophic. Not yet. But things were slipping. One afternoon, I got a voicemail from Harold, my old accountant, the one who hadn't responded the day I was locked out of the system. His voice was stiff, professional, like he was afraid I might still be angry. Hey Richard, just wanted to check something from the 2014 restructuring. If you've got a second, give me a ring. I didn't call back right away. I sat with it for a while, trying to figure out what was bothering me. And then it hit me. That year, 2014, was when we restructured the holding agreement for the commercial property on Front Street, the one our main office sits on. And I remembered that Linda and I had intentionally kept ownership of the land separate from the business, with my name on the lease and the renewal schedule locked into a 20-year clause. It was small at the time, just a practical decision to keep certain assets safe. But now, it meant something else entirely. I poured myself a drink and went into the garage, pulled out the old safe, the one with the original paperwork I hadn't touched in years. It was all there. Deeds, contracts, lease agreements, signatures. And in that moment, something in me shifted. Not rage, not grief, just clarity. They hadn't just taken the company. They'd taken it blindly. I put everything back in the safe and didn't say a word. I didn't call Harold. Didn't reach out to Josh. I waited. I watched. When the mail came, I started paying closer attention to the envelopes. Not just the bills, but the notices, the subtle changes. New vendors. Shifted accounts. I kept track. Not obsessively, just enough to know when a pattern was forming. I didn't need to do anything yet. They were writing their own problems faster than I ever could. Funny thing is, they thought the hardest part was getting me out. They thought I'd hang around, begging for scraps, maybe asking for lunch meetings or sending awkward emails late at night. But I didn't do any of that. I didn't even act wounded. That unsettled them more than anything else. Emily sent a few messages in those first months, concerned, almost apologetic. I answered once with a polite, "Doing well, thanks," and left it at that. She didn't try again. Kara stopped trying entirely. Josh never bothered in the first place. That was fine. I wasn't interested in their version of concern. But every now and then, when I saw their names in a news alert or someone mentioned the company in town, I'd smile a little. They were still talking like they'd conquered something. Still posting polished quotes online about innovation and growth. And still, quietly, things weren't adding up. The real shift came in the third month, when I got a call from an old supplier we'd used for years, Gene, out in Dayton. He asked if I was still involved with operations. I told him no, not really. He hesitated, then asked if I knew why 2 of his recent invoices had bounced. "I've never had that happen before," he said. "And I've worked with you folks since '97. I told him I didn't know, but that I appreciated the call. When we hung up, I made a note in my book. Gene, bounced payments, June. That wasn't the first crack, but it was the first one they'd feel. They thought I was gone. They thought I was off somewhere licking my wounds, watching the world move on without me. But they were wrong. I hadn't left. I'd just stepped out of the spotlight. I wasn't the founder on the wall anymore. I wasn't the signature on the contracts. But I still held the blueprint. And they hadn't noticed the fuse I was already lighting under the floorboards. They didn't see it at first. That's what happens when you build a house on someone else's foundation and convince yourself it's your own. They walked in, painted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and thought they'd built something new. But I knew where the wiring ran. I knew what happened when too many things pulled from the same circuit. And I knew exactly how long it would take for it all to start flickering. It started with the Henderson account. That wasn't just any client. It was one of our oldest. I brought them in back in '98, did their print marketing by hand the first few years, stuck with them through 2 ownership changes and a merger. They stayed loyal because I was loyal. But now they were gone. Not quietly either. I didn't find out through rumor. I found out because Bill Henderson, the son who took over the business, called me himself. "Just wanted you to hear it from me," he said. "We're pulling our contract. Been a mess over there lately." Kara promised a revamp. What we got was late orders and radio silence. I listened, didn't interrupt. He paused. "Honestly, Richard, it doesn't feel like the same company anymore." I thanked him, told him I understood, and we hung up. Then I wrote it down. Henderson account lost. Legacy, trust broken. That wasn't a crack. That was a chunk out of the wall. So I gave it a little push. I waited 3 days. Then I printed a redacted version of Kara's internal strategy memo, the one I found in an unlocked shared folder from back when they hadn't properly reset server permissions. It was full of buzzwords and spin, but anyone with a brain could read between the lines. Cost-cutting, automation, elimination of long-standing client perks. I slid it into an envelope, no return address, and mailed it to a trade blog editor I knew from years back. I didn't include a note. I didn't need to. The post went up a week later. A quiet little grenade titled, "Growing Pains or Strategic Missteps." Inside the new era at Hale & Company. It didn't accuse anyone directly, but it quoted several unnamed employees, hinted at client dissatisfaction, and most importantly, questioned the sudden departure of Henderson and 2 other accounts I hadn't even heard about yet. I didn't comment, didn't share it, but I watched the timing. Because the very next day, I got a second call, this one from a former client asking if I'd be willing to consult independently. Not for Hale & Company. For them. They wanted someone who understood legacy brand messaging. I told them I wasn't taking on anything formal, but I gave them a name of a young local printer I trusted. Someone outside the family web. The client was grateful. Hale & Company never knew they'd lost that one, or who sent them walking. The dinner with Emily happened a few weeks later. She picked the restaurant, one Linda used to love. That told me something already. She arrived first, looked anxious. I let her talk. She tried to start light, asked how I was. I told her I was doing fine. She nodded, then stared into her glass for a while before finally saying it. "Things are not going great." I said nothing. She kept going. "We've lost some contracts. The team's stretched thin. Kara's been difficult. Josh won't listen. He thinks we're still in control. But Dad," she paused, and for the first time since they cut me out, she looked genuinely afraid. We might not be. I raised an eyebrow. Then maybe you should talk to whoever's running the place. She gave a short, tired laugh. That's the problem. No one's actually running it. Silence stretched for a long beat. Then she added, more quietly, I just thought. Maybe we could use someone who remembers how this place was built. I looked at her for a long time. She didn't say it as a strategy. She said it like a confession. You mean someone who remembers why it worked? I asked. She nodded. There were tears in her eyes. She wasn't pretending to be the adult in the room anymore. She looked like a daughter who knew something was slipping away and didn't know how to stop it. For a moment, I felt something crack open in me. A small piece of the old man who used to drive to the office at 6:30 every morning with a travel mug and a worn leather briefcase. But I couldn't step back into that role. Not now. Not yet. I folded my napkin and placed it next to the plate. I don't think I'm the right person for that anymore, I said, calm as ever. You've got leadership now. I'm just a name on the wall. She didn't argue. She just looked down at her plate. The next morning, I called the county clerk's office to confirm the renewal schedule on the land lease under the main building. Just routine. Just a formality. And just as I suspected, they hadn't filed the renewal packet for the new term. I made a note. That same week, another client called. This time someone I hadn't worked with in over a decade. He said he'd tried contacting Hale and company multiple times about a missed delivery window and finally gave up. I figured I'd call the guy who used to get things done, he said. I told him I was retired. But I still answered his questions. One of them being whether Hale and company still had warehousing capacity in Cincinnati. I paused, then answered, not anymore. He swore under his breath. I smiled and hung up. It wasn't sabotage. Not really. I wasn't lying. I was just letting people see what was already true. From the outside, it might have looked like I was doing nothing. Taking walks, drinking coffee, fixing the hinge on the back gate. But from where I sat, the wires were tightening. Pressure was building. They didn't know it yet, but they were standing on a trap door they'd built themselves. I'd just kept the blueprint. And now I'd started unlocking the hinges. The first sign that something had truly broken wasn't a headline or a lawsuit. It was a box. A large, damp, dented box sitting outside the Hale and company front entrance like it had been dropped there out of spite. I didn't see it myself, but the photo made its way around town, posted on social media by a former employee, probably out of spite or boredom. It showed the box half opened, rain-soaked stacks of misprinted flyers spilling onto the sidewalk, smeared logos, wrong phone numbers, crooked text. A company name misspelled across 1,000 sheets of glossy paper. And there, in the background, you could see Josh standing in the glass doorway, holding a phone, staring at the mess like he couldn't understand how it got there. That was the image people remembered. Not the blog posts. Not the polite resignations. Not the market share chatter. That box. That look on his face. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a broadcast, a visual confirmation that the company was no longer what it pretended to be. That something had gone sour. The client who returned the order didn't mince words either. They posted the photo with the caption, "Is this what Hale and Company stands for now?" 3 hours later, their name disappeared from the partners page on the company website. But the screenshot lived on. The next day, 2 more clients quietly cut ties. One of them had been with us since my second year in business. I hadn't spoken to them in over a decade, but apparently, their COO still had my number. He left a message I never returned. "Richard, I don't know what's going on over there, but we're out. Should have happened sooner. They don't even understand what we needed, let alone how to deliver it. I hope you're doing okay." I deleted it without listening to the rest. I wasn't the one who needed checking on. The collapse wasn't just professional. That was the part they could survive. People lose contracts. Companies shrink. What started to shake them was the silence that followed. Not from me, from the world around them. Suddenly, people weren't answering their emails. Board members were slow to reply. Former mentors stopped liking their posts. The room got quieter, and they didn't understand why. That's what happens when the story starts to change. You feel it before you hear it. And right in the middle of all that, someone leaked a voicemail to a journalist. It wasn't malicious, at least I don't think so. More likely it was someone trying to make sense of the internal chaos. But either way, it ended up where it needed to. In the voicemail, Josh was heard saying, "We're bleeding out. I don't care what we have to do, just fix it before it gets to Dad." The journalist didn't print the whole recording. Just one line, paraphrased. Hale and company leadership privately concerned about operational integrity. But those of us who knew Josh's voice could hear it plain as day. And so could Emily. That same week, she sent me an email. Not an official one. A personal one. Subject line, please. The message was short. Almost too short. I don't know how this happened. We didn't know how deep everything went. Can we talk? Please. I stared at it for a long time. Then I hit reply, typed out a message. A calm, clear, careful paragraph about how things could have been different, about how leadership isn't about titles, about how you can't erase foundation and expect the house to stand. Then I deleted every word and closed the laptop. They weren't owed that conversation. Not anymore. They had their chance to talk. What they wanted now wasn't reconciliation. It was rescue. And I wasn't in the business of rescues. Meanwhile, the lease on the main building expired. They didn't even notice until the renewal rejected notice was taped to the front doors by the city clerk. Someone took a picture. It went up on a community forum under the heading, Guess Hale and Company. Didn't check the fine print. It wasn't about the building. It was about the signal. The public symbol that something was gone. Ownership, control, certainty. They could scramble all they wanted, but they were already tenants in a place they didn't own, pretending they hadn't just been evicted. I stood across the street that afternoon, leaning on the hood of my truck, sipping a bad coffee from the gas station across the road. No one noticed me. They were too busy watching two of the managers argue in the parking lot, waving papers, making frantic phone calls. One of them kicked the front door when their badge didn't work. Someone from HR was crying. The receptionist, the same girl who once called me Mr. Hale, even after I told her to stop, walked out carrying a cardboard box of personal items. And there it was, the moment that would stick. Not the articles, not the memos, not even the press. The company I built unraveling in the daylight, while the people who stole it stood ankle-deep in the wreckage, pretending it was all just temporary. They weren't panicking because the building was lost. They were panicking because they realized they never owned it. The image stuck in my mind long after I drove home. Josh shouting into his phone, pacing in tight circles near the curb. Kara holding her forehead with both hands, not saying a word. Emily sitting alone on the bench out front, staring at nothing, her hands still folded in her lap. I didn't feel satisfied. Not exactly. It wasn't joy. It was something quieter, like the stillness after a long storm. When you step outside and everything's changed, not violently, just permanently. And I still hadn't told them a thing. The building was empty when I got there, stripped down to drywall, dust, and a few cords dangling from the ceiling. The sign had already been taken down, just a faint outline left where the letters used to hang. The reception desk was gone. All that remained was the smell of stale toner and the echo of shoes on bare tile. I walked the perimeter alone, slowly, making one final round before the new tenants moved in next week. There wasn't much to feel. It had already died. I unlocked the door to the back office. My old office. They'd turned it into a storage closet after I left. I flicked the light switch, saw the patchy paint, the place where the family photo used to hang. The one with Linda, before she got sick. I didn't feel anger. I felt memory. And then I shut the door and left it that way for good. The company they stole from me didn't go out in one dramatic blaze. It unraveled slowly, contract by contract, failure by failure, until the only people still answering emails were the interns, and even they knew better. Clients left. Staff left. Eventually, even the walls gave up. But if there was one moment I'll remember, it was Josh. He was standing outside the building the day the sheriff's notice went up. I stayed in my truck across the street, parked behind a delivery van. He didn't see me at first. He was pacing, on the phone, waving his hands around like that would keep the roof from caving in. And then, in one of those brief pauses, he looked up, right at me. Our eyes locked across 4 lanes of traffic and 20 years of decisions. He stopped moving. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I didn't do anything but watch. And he knew. He knew who had done it. Not out of malice. Not out of rage. But with precision. Because here's what they never figured out. While they were busy running marketing meetings and slapping their names on company letterhead, I still owned the one thing none of them had thought to take. The dirt. The land. The deed to the very ground beneath their headquarters. It had sat in a quiet little LLC, untouched, unassuming, buried in plain sight since 1996. They built their modern empire on it. And I let them. They thought the lease would renew like always, that the lawyer they hired would read the fine print, that someone had it handled. They were wrong. And by the time they realized the renewal window had passed, I'd already signed it over, not to them, but to a new tenant, a competitor, a firm I personally introduced to 3 of our former clients. They tried to call. Kara left 3 voicemails. Josh sent 2 emails. Emily knocked on my door, in person. I didn't answer. She stood there for 20 minutes. I watched from inside the living room, curtains drawn. She knocked again. No shouting. No anger. Just that quiet knock that said she knew. And I let her keep knocking. Then I turned off the porch light. That was the last time any of them came to the house. A week later, I received the final certified letter. Hale & Company was officially dissolved. No fanfare. No press release. Just a formality. The name they once fought to modernize was now gone. And I didn't even have to raise my voice. I just pulled the floor out from under them. They thought I was retired. That I was obsolete. That I was done. I wasn't. I was giving them enough rope. And they hung the whole damn business with it. They took my name off the building. But I never needed the name. I still had the keys.